There is a forest on this planet so large that it outmeasures imagination. It runs, nearly unbroken, a quarter of the way around the earth. Birch and pine and spruce and fir, silence and snow. The greatest forest that exists or has ever existed, and scattered through its western reaches, strung along frozen rivers and winter roads, stand villages of low log houses, each one breathing a thread of smoke up into air so cold it rings. And the winters here are not weather. They are a power of nature that has swallowed the armies of emperors whole. And yet inside those log walls, for 1,000 years, life has been not merely endured, but kept, warm, flowered, storied, and deeply, deliberately cozy, around the most ingenious domestic invention of the entire cold country world, a stove so central to existence that the house is really built around it. And tonight, in the deepest week of a Russian winter, you are not merely beside that stove. You are asleep on top of it. So settle into your bed. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest wherever they are comfortable. There is nothing to remember tonight, and nothing to solve. If you drift off before the night is done, that is exactly what this story is for. You wake up inside a Russian Izba on the sleeping shelf of the great stove, and you are, from your heels to your shoulder blades, magnificently warm. Understand your bed, because there has never been another like it in all these centuries of ours. Beneath the felt and the sheepskins you're lying on is not a mattress, but masonry, the broad flat top of an enormous whitewashed stove of brick and clay, big as a small room, warm as a living animal. And the warmth is not the sharp heat of a fire. The fire went out hours ago. It is the deep, even stored warmth of a great mass of clay that drank a whole morning's blaze and has been paying it back steadily, gently ever since, and will still be paying it back at dawn. It is the mud brick wall of the old river turned into furniture, the thermal tide you slept inside in Egypt, rebuilt in the far north as a bed and lying on it in the dark, in the deepest cold on earth. You are being warmed from below by a fire that ended before sunset, which is a kind of domestic time travel. Yesterday's flame arriving all night through the bricks, on schedule, like a letter posted early. The room below you is dark and even breathing. The double windows hold their squares of blue snowlight. Somewhere near your feet, behind the stove where it is warmest, a cricket, the house's oldest tenant, files one thin silver note at long contented intervals. And outside, immense and everywhere and utterly excluded, the winter leans on the log walls with all its weight, and the logs, as they do a few times every deep frost night, answer it with a single sharp crack, loud as a snapped branch, the sound of seasoned timber shouldering the cold, and nobody in the house so much as turns over, because that crack is the sound of the wall winning. Let your hand slide out from under the sheepskin and rest flat on the warm whitewashed clay beside you, and take the measure of the great stove properly, because the petch, as this house calls it, is not a stove in your century sense at all. It is the engine of survival, the kitchen, the bakery, the bed, the pharmacy, and the heart of the home, all in one whitewashed mountain, and it does everything on one fire a day. Here is the whole genius of it, and it is the opposite genius of the fires you have slept beside so far. The Viking longfire, the Abbey hearth, the inn's brazier, all of them were open flames, spending their heat into the room as fast as they made it, needing feeding through the night, dying if neglected. The Pesh does not spend. It saves. Its firebox opens into a huge vaulted chamber deep inside tons of brick and clay, and once a day, in the early morning, the mistress of this house burns a fierce hot fire in it, birch logs roaring for 2 or 3 hours while the day's cooking goes in and out, and then, and this is the heart of the matter, The fire is allowed to die, the coals are raked, the damper is closed, and the whole day's heat, instead of escaping up the chimney, is locked inside the masonry, and the stove becomes a battery, a great charged mass of warmth that then radiates evenly, gently, hour after hour, through the whole day and the whole night. No flame, no tending, no waking to feed it. One fire in the morning and warmth until the next, and the fuel it burns in a winter is a fraction of what an open hearth would devour to do half the job. And because the top of a masonry battery is the warmest flat surface in the entire province, the builders long ago did the obvious, humane, and wonderful thing and made it a bed. The stove's broad back and the wide sleeping shelf built between its shoulder and the wall are the house's places of honor, and the law of the household is as old as the household. The stovetop belongs to the grandmother, whose bones have earned it, and to the smallest children, who are stacked up there like warm loaves, and to the sick, whenever they are sick, because the stove's steady mild heat is the first medicine of the north, and to the guest, tonight. Which is you? The able-bodied sleep on the benches and the shelf below? Close enough. Everyone sleeps inside the stove's long exhale. And in the coldest weeks, when the frost outside grows teeth, the whole family's night arranges itself around the great warm mass by seniority and need, the Izba's own solar system, every sleeper in orbit around a whitewashed sun that was lit this morning, banked by noon, and will not fully set for 2 days. The house holding this warmth is itself a masterwork of one tool, and morning light will show it to you plainly. But you can read it now with your ears and your memory of the evening. The Izba is logs, whole pine trunks laid horizontal, notched and locked at the corners, so that each log cradles the ones above and below. The walls rising course by course like a basket woven from trees, and between every log, packed tight in the joints, runs a caulking of dried forest moss, gathered by the sackful in autumn, which swells when damp and seals the wall tighter than any mortar, so that the house is timber and forest floor, and nothing else, cut and raised from within a mile of where it stands. And it was built, the whole of it, with an axe, not for poverty of tools, but by settled preference of the craft. For the carpenters of this forest world hold that the axe is the honest tool, and their axes are not the crude wedges your century imagines, but precise, balanced instruments they use for everything: felling, squaring, notching, smoothing, even fine joinery. And a Russian village carpenter can produce with an axe a lone work that makes visiting joiners put down their saws respectfully. And the old builder's boast, still told by every stove in this province, is of churches raised, whole soaring wooden churches without a single iron nail, timber locked into timber by geometry and skill. And the boast is true, and some of those churches are standing yet in your own century, gray and towering, held up by nothing but the way their logs embrace. The Izba's door is low and its threshold high, so that winter must stoop and step to follow you in, and lose most of itself in the little entry hall. The seni, the unheated airlock every northern house of this journey has built in its own dialect. The windows are small and doubled for the winter, a second frame fitted inside the first each autumn with a hand's width of still air sealed between. Your century's double glazing anticipated by centuries in pine and putty, and along the outside base of the walls runs the zavalinka, the banked ridge of earth and straw heaped against the lowest logs each fall, the house tucking itself in at the ankles, and above it all the snow itself deep on the roof, drifted to the windowsills, has joined the defense because snow, the great paradox of the north, is a blanket, dry snow being mostly trapped air, and a roof under 2 feet of it is a warmer roof, and the same winter that besieges this house insulates it, which the house has always known and accepts each year without comment, like a tax paid in kind. Across the room from the stove, caddy corner, where the two benches meet under the small steady flame of a hanging lamp, is the house's other pole. And between these two corners, the warm one and the holy one, the whole life of the Izba is strung. It is the icon corner, the shelf where the family's icons stand, dark gilded faces in the lamplight, draped with an embroidered cloth, and before them burns the lampada, a small glass of oil with a floating wick, lit always, trimmed daily. The Izba's version of the flame you have found kept in every century. The sanctuary lamp, the andon, the daughter's nightlight. The household refusing, one more time, and in one more language, to let its rooms go fully dark. Guests entering this house look first to that corner and greet it before they greet their hosts. And the seat beneath it is the seat of honor. And the corner's name in this language is the Krasny Ugol. And that adjective is about to hand you the evening's first gift. Because Krasny, in the old tongue of this country, did not mean red. It meant beautiful. The beautiful corner, that is the icon shelf's true name. And only over long centuries did the word for beautiful and the word for the color red, always kin in this language, settle into meaning just the color, so that a whole family of old names must now be read twice. The most famous square in this country's greatest city, the vast cobbled plain your century knows from 1,000 photographs and calls, Red Square, was named long before that color meant anything political, and it was not named for its bricks either. It is, in its bones, the beautiful square, Krasnaya, the fine one, the splendid one, and the red that your century sees in the name arrived later and squatted in a house built by an older, gentler word. The grandmother on the stove beside you would find nothing surprising in this. Of course, beautiful and red were once one word, she would say. Have you seen a fire? Have you seen a sunset on snow? What other color would beautiful be? Take the census of the sleeping house from your warm height, because an Izba in winter holds its people close, and the holding is the design. Below and around the stove, on the wide benches built into the walls and the plank shelf that runs beneath your own, the household is stacked in its winter order. The master of the house and his wife nearest the stove's flank. The grown son and his young wife beyond, for this house, like most in the village, holds 3 generations under one low roof. The sons bringing their brides home to the family hearth. The household growing by marriage the way the walls grew by logs. Their firstborn, 5 months old, sleeps in the Izba's most charming piece of engineering, the hanging cradle, a shallow wooden trough slung from a springy pole fixed to the ceiling beam, so that the lightest touch, or the baby's own stirring, sets it gently bobbing, a cradle that rocks itself, hung in the warmest air of the room, and the young mother can reach up from her bench in the dark and give the pole one push without ever fully waking. Which is precisely why some genius grandmother invented it, generations of sleep ago. The grandmother herself lies along the stovetop's far side, your neighbor in the place of honor, flat on her back, hands folded, gray braid over her shoulder, asleep with the totality of a woman who has outworked 3 emperors, and it is her house in every way that operates. Her son may own it before the law. She runs it before God, the stove's one daily firing timed by her, the year's stores counted by her, and the whole sleeping arrangement you are lying in the middle of approved, bench by bench, by her, 40 winters running. By the door on the coldest bench, because the young burn hot, the hired lad. Under the benches, the dog, and in the sene, muffled, the occasional stamp of the cow brought in from the yard to the warm side of the wall for the deep frost weeks, breathing her big patient warmth into the house's ledger, like the buyers and the sleeping camels of every cold night in this journey. 9 souls, 1 cricket, one cow, one self-rocking cradle, all in one room, built around one warm mountain. And if you asked anyone here whether they were crowded, they would need the question explained. Crowded is a summer idea. In winter, the word is kept. And now, before the night goes deeper, the passage, this journey, owes this house above most, because the warmth you are lying in has a legal condition attached, and honesty must read it aloud. The family sleeping around you does not, in the fullest sense, belong to itself. They are serfs, bound peasants, and in this country, in this century, the condition binds most of the countryside. They cannot leave this land without leave. Their labor is owed, so many days of the week, to the estate whose fields surround the village, or its worth in payments, and the lord of that estate holds over them powers your century would not believe attached to any private person, to move them, to punish them, to permit or refuse their marriages, to sell, in effect, the village with the land. This household stove, its stores, its 3 generations of skill and order, all of it stands on ground that can be pulled from under it by a signature in a drawing room the family will never see, and the injustice of it is not a secret waiting for later centuries to discover. It is argued about in the capital at this very hour, denounced in books the censors chase, mourned in songs the village itself sings, and within a generation of tonight, it will be, at last, on paper at least, abolished, and the long tangled aftermath of it will shape this country for a century after that. You know the discipline by now, and this house deserves it as much as any hall in this journey. The warmth is real. The grandmother's sovereignty over her stove is real. The skill in these axe-cut walls, the tenderness in that self-rocking cradle, the whole deep human accomplishment of this room is real, and the bondage underneath it is real too, and neither fact will be allowed to erase the other tonight. The people of this Izba built a warm and orderly world inside a condition they did not choose and could not refuse, which is, when you stop and weigh it, not a lesser achievement than the free households of this journey managed. It may be the greater one. Sleep in it with respect. Supper, hours behind you now, deserves its remembering because it came out of the stove's morning fire and was the stove's daily miracle performed in the usual way, which is to say, by physics and a grandmother. When the petch roars in the morning, it cooks the whole day at once. The great vaulted chamber, raked of coals, holds baking heat for hours, falling slowly through exactly the temperatures a kitchen wants, and the pots go in on the long-handled fork, the ukvat, the iron crescent on a pole that grips a pot's waist and swings it deep into the glowing vault. The one athletic feat of this kitchen, performed by the grandmother with the flick of 40 years, and there the day's food simply lives. The pots sitting in the falling heat, cooking, then holding, then merely staying warm, so that supper at dusk came out of a stove whose fire ended at mid-morning. Hot, and this slow-sealed vault cooking is the secret of the whole northern kitchen. Flavors married over 8 patient hours, nothing scorched, nothing hurried, the stove as cook as well as furnace. And what it cooked is the old couplet the whole country repeats with its spoon in its hand. Shchidakasha, pishchanasha, cabbage soup and porridge. That is our food. The shchi first, the eternal soup, sauerkraut and onion, and, in a good week, a bone, simmered in the vault until the sourness has gone deep and round, eaten from a common bowl in the old way, each spoon waiting its turn, with black bread. Then the kasha, buckwheat groats swelled soft in the stove's depth, with butter melting into the crater. The porridge this country would take to a desert island. The porridge it praises in Proverbs. The porridge, they say here, you cannot spoil with butter, meaning some good things cannot be overdone. And the black bread itself, the true staple, dense, dark, faintly sour rye, baked weekly in the same vault, loaves the size of cartwheels. The bread this country misses abroad the way sailors miss the sea, cut against the chest in thick slices, treated with a reverence just short of the icon corners. Because in the North, grain is the whole argument, and rye is the grain that never once betrayed them to a frost. To drink, kvass, the near beer of black bread itself, rye crusts fermented in water with a little of last batch, tart, faintly fizzy, barely stronger than the bread it came from. The small ale of this particular world, brewed in a crock behind the stove, drunk by everyone, wasted on no one. The loaf's afterlife and the whole supper, soup, porridge, bread, and bread's own drink, is one plant family and a cabbage, transformed by one morning fire, and one old woman into deep winter contentment, which is this house's entire economic philosophy, served hot. One small ceremony crowned the supper, and it is the oldest gesture of this whole country, so it should crown the remembering too. When you first crossed this threshold at dusk, stamping the snow off, the mistress met you with a round loaf on an embroidered towel, and on the loaf, a little wooden dish of salt, and you did what every guest of this land has done for 1,000 years, broke a corner of the bread, dipped it in the salt, and ate it standing, and with that mouthful, you stopped being a stranger. Bread and salt. Calypso. It is this country's entire theory of hospitality compressed into two nouns, so central that the very word for hospitality here is built from them, bread and saltness, and the logic under it is winter logic, plain and deep. Bread is the labor of the whole year, plowing to threshing to the stove's vault, offered. Salt, in the old centuries, was the costly thing, the trader's thing, the preserver against the dark months, offered. Between them they say, in one gesture, we give you our work and our wealth, our staple and our store, and the guest who has taken bread and salt is inside the household's peace, an obligation running both directions, older than any of the czars whose name you learned tonight. Emperors are greeted with bread and salt on estates and at city gates. Brides are met with it at their new thresholds, and travelers like you are met with it in doorways full of snowlight. And the loaf now stands back on its shelf below the icons, one corner missing, which is not damage. In this house, a loaf with a corner broken by a guest is a loaf that has done the finest thing bread can do. And after supper came the ceremony this house would sooner skip church than skip, and its instrument is standing on the table still, going quietly cold in the dark. A brass shape like a domed and dignified urn, with a chimney in its heart, and a little crown tap at its waist. The samovar. Its name says exactly what it does. Sam, self, varet, to boil, the self-boiler, and the design is the Petch's own logic struck in brass. Down the center of the water urn runs a vertical fire tube, filled with pine cones and charcoal, lit from below, drawing like a chimney, so that the fire stands inside the water it heats. No pot, no hearth, every ray of heat surrounded on all sides by the thing it is for, and the urn sings as it comes to the boil, actually sings. A rising sequence of murmurs and whistles. The household reads like a clock. First voice, second voice. The rolling silence just before readiness. And when it is ready, it will hold the family's tea, hot through a whole evening from its own banked heart, a portable, tabletop, singing cousin of the great stove itself, which is why this country took one look at it and adopted it into the family. The tea it serves came further than any other thing in this room. It came from China, overland, the whole width of Asia, in caravans that take a year and more, chest upon chest of black tea swaying across the steppes and the mountains to the border town, where the empires trade, and up the winter roads to fairs and shops, and finally to this table. Tea that has crossed more of the earth than anyone who will ever drink it, and the household drinks it accordingly in the manner of the country, glass after glass, hot and strong, not with sugar, but through it, a hard lump of sugar held between the teeth while the tea flows past. Vaperkusku, sweetness rationed by geology rather than spoon. One lump lasting a whole evening of glasses. If the teeth are patient, and the evening tea is the day's parliament, the samovar presiding, the glasses refilling, the talk running long and warm while the frost tightens on the windows, and no single object in this whole journey of centuries, not the kettle of the lighthouse, nor the teapot of the inn, has ever gathered a household more completely than the singing urn on that table. Which is why, when the people of this country later scatter across your century's whole map, the samovar goes with them into apartments and exiles and photographs, the portable hearth, the brass grandmother, the self-boiler that also, somehow, self-gathers the family around it. Anywhere on earth it stands. The honey in tonight's tea has its own chapter of forest, and the master told it over the samovar with the pride of an inheritance, because his family have been bee men on this stretch of woods for 5 generations. The old craft of this country did not keep bees in garden hives. It kept them in the forest itself, in the standing trees, hollows cut high in the great pines, with an axe and shaped inside for the swarms, each bee tree marked with the family's sign cut into the bark, property recognized in law and custom for 1,000 years, and a family's bee trees were scattered through miles of taiga and visited by climbing. The bee man going up on a woven rawhide strap, looped around trunk and waist, hitching upward in a craft as old as the marks, to tend the hollows and take the honey, and leave the bees their winter share. The forest hives gave the old country its 2 sweetest exports, honey, in an age before sugar reached these woods at any price a village could pay, and wax for the candles of every church from here to the sea, and the beautiful old word for the craft rings with the forest itself, Bortnichestvo, the hollow tree art. These days the family's bees live nearer home, in carved log hives standing in the orchard corner, like a small wooden village of their own, snow-hatted tonight, each hive a thick section of hollowed trunk, the forest hollow domesticated and brought to the yard, and the bees inside are doing this very hour exactly what the household around you is doing, clustered in a warm ball around their queen, shivering in shifts to make heat, eating the summer's honey at the patient winter rate, a village within the village, banked and provisioned and profoundly asleep, and the master, who checks the hive's snow like he checks the cellar mound, will tell you that a man who wants to understand the North need only study a winter hive, everything huddled, everything shared, everything scheduled, and the whole enterprise living from October to April on sweetness put by in June. Beneath the floor at the room's cold end, reached by a trapdoor and a short ladder, lies the house's 3rd pole after the warm corner, and the beautiful one, the deep one, the pod pole, the cellar, and you have stood in this room in every century now. So this house will show you only what is new in its dialect of the old language. What is new is the forest. The other cellars of this journey were farms underground, grain and cheese, and the slaughter of the yard. This one is half wilderness, because the household's other field is the taiga itself, and every autumn the village moves into it with baskets. The mushrooms first, the great solemn harvest of the northern woods, gathered by species and rank, the noble whites for drying on long threads above the stove until they shrink to dark fragrant leather that will make the winter's soups taste of the whole forest. The milk caps, and the rest salted down in barrels under weighted lids. Then the berries, lingonberry and cranberry, laid up whole in water. cloudberries from the bog gone to preserves, bilberries dried on screens in the stove's afterheat, nuts, honey from the hollow log hives at the wood's edge, and alongside the wild shelf, the gardens, the barrels that are this country's winter vitamin, cabbage salted into sauerkraut by the hundredweight in a family bee each October, shredding and salting and treading in a rite as fixed as any in the church calendar, cucumbers brined with dill and oak leaf and blackcurrant leaf, each house's crock its own argued-over scripture, apples fermented whole in the sauerkraut barrels, coming up in February tasting of wine and winter. Nothing here is smoked gold or consular vintage. It is sour, salt, dark, and northern. The taste of survival, refined over 1,000 years into actual preference, for this household would choose its pickles now over fresh cucumbers, and the visitor who winters here comes, around February, to understand them completely, when the sour crunch of last summer's garden, eaten in the stove's warmth with black bread, while the snow ticks on the window, stops tasting like preservation and starts tasting like victory. Now put on the sheepskin that hangs by the door of your imagination and step out with the master for the last look of the night, the one every householder of the deep frost takes before the final bolt, because the winter outside this Izba is worth one respectful minute of your unprotected attention. The cold meets you in the seni and takes your breath at the threshold like a toll. Outside, the night is absolutely still and absolutely enormous. The frost has come down hard under a clearing sky, the kind of cold that has a sound, a thin constant ring at the edge of hearing, and the snow underfoot does not crunch. It squeaks, the dry, sharp squeak of true deep frost that every northern child reads like a thermometer. The village street is a single smooth white channel between drifted fences, blue-gray under the stars. The sledge road down its middle, polished to a dull shine by runners, and every izba along it is a low white whaleback with its window squares glowing amber through the frost ferns and its chimney thread rising dead straight. 20 households breathing in unison into a sky rigid with stars. The master reads his weather the way all your winter hosts have read it, in half a glance. The straight smoke, the squeaking snow, the ring around the moon that is not there tonight. Good. Hard frost holding. No wind, no snow coming. The sledge road will be iron by morning, and the timber can be hauled, and he checks the byre door and the cellar mound and the bathhouse ember. The round every master of every winter house in this journey has walked in furs, in wool, in oilskins, the perimeter of the kept world confirmed in 4 minutes of held breath. And far off, from the forest edge, comes the one sound your century expects of this night. And the village's dogs answer it from their yards, deep and businesslike. Not alarmed, a border being stated in both directions. The oldest treaty of the North renewed nightly. They to their forest, we to our fires and the wolves, who have no more interest in a village full of dogs and axes than the dogs have in the deep taiga. Honor it as they honor it every night, at a distance, in passing, on their own affairs. The master listens the way you listen to rain, notes nothing, and goes in, and the great door bolt slides home with a sound like a full stop, and the winter is outside, all of it, and you are not. And the master's last look outside took in one more thing worth carrying to sleep. The road itself, because the road in a northern winter is at its annual best, and tomorrow it will be busy. You crossed half of it coming here, so you know. The winter road of this country does not follow the summer road. It improves on it. Cutting straight across frozen bogs the summer track must skirt, running for whole white miles down the middle of the frozen river itself. The same promotion of water to highway you saw in the Longhouse's country, and here raised to a national institution, for this empire of distances moves its heavy life in winter, grain and timber and iron, hay and whole fares, sliding on runners over roads that cost nothing to build and are rebuilt free every December. The sledge is the season's carriage, from the peasant's low wood hauler to the flying troika of the post roads, 3 horses abreast, the middle one trotting tall in the arched wooden bow over its shoulders, the outer pair cantering low and outward like wings, and on that arch, by law and custom, both. The bells, because a troika at speed on a snow road is nearly silent, and the bells are its voice, heard a mile off through the frost, a bright, continuous shaken music that says clear the road, and says it so beautifully that this country's poets never stopped writing it down. The bell song swelling, passing in a hiss of runners and a blur of manes, and fading up the white road with its music trailing after, the sound of distance itself being dealt with, at a gallop, in sheepskin. Tonight the road lies empty and blue, iron hard, perfect, waiting, and your own Valenki, the felt boots that carried you up it, stand drying on the stove ledge below you, felted wool through and through, boot and stocking and insulation in one seamless piece. The North's final word on the subject of feet, warming for tomorrow in the one place in the province, guaranteed warm. Across the yard, small and hunched under its snow load, stands the little log building that is this culture's answer to the Ofuro and the Lagardiger and the Thermae. And its answer is steam, and its day was today, and your muscles are still carrying the news. The banya, a one-room log hut with a stove of loose stones, fired for hours until the stones glow, and then the household, in shifts, in the dim resinous heat, and the ritual is its own liturgy. Water flung on the stones, exploding into a soft, roaring pulse of steam that takes the little room's temperature past anything the uninitiated believe survivable, and then, at the heat's height, the instrument no other bathing culture invented. The venik, a bundle of leafy birch twigs, cured and soaked back to summer softness, with which the bathers beat themselves and one another rhythmically, thoroughly. Back, legs, shoulders, and it is not punishment, whatever it looks like. It is a massage of leaves and heat together. The birch oils raised by the steam, the blood brought singing to the skin, the whole body persuaded open, and the smell of it, hot birch leaf and pine tar and clean steam, is the smell this country would choose if it could keep only one. And then, because the banya's second law is contrast, the door and the snow, taken at a run, the plunge into the drift or the bucket of meltwater over the head, the gasp that empties the whole alphabet, the skin shouting, the heart applauding, and then back into the steam, and out again, 3 rounds of it, 4, until the body has been argued so thoroughly in both directions that it surrenders every knot it owns, and the bather who walks back across the yard afterward, steaming gently in the frost in felt boots and a sheepskin over bare skin, pink, boneless, and beatific, is as clean and as loose as this whole journey of centuries knows how to make a human being. The banya is Saturday's right here, as the wash was Saturdays in the North, and it is also the birthhouse and the healing house of village tradition, the place of steam for whatever ails, and its own small spirit is said to live behind its stove and to insist on courtesy, the last bather leaving water in a whisk for him, and whether or not anyone precisely believes it, the water is always left, because in this country, as in every country you have slept through, the household powers are cheap to honor and expensive to insult, and courtesy, like heat, is best kept banked. The evening that carried you to this warm shelf ran on the Izba's winter industry, and the tools of it are resting now around the dark room like a scattered sentence. By the best bench, the spinning wheel, this century's upgrade to the drop spindle you have watched turn in 6 other centuries. The great wheel and treadle that let the spinner sit and the thread run continuous, and the mistress and her daughter-in-law spun the lamplight away tonight, as the women of this whole journey have always spun it, flax from their own strip of field, wool from their own sheep, the thread of the household literally lengthening by the hour, and on the wall, the loom weights knocked down for the deep winter weaving weeks, when the Izba fills with its shuttle beat exactly as the longhouse filled with the loom weights knock, the north weaving through the dark half, in every language it speaks. On the men's side of the lamp, the quieter crafts, the master mending horse harness with waxed thread and all, the son whittling spoons from birch blanks, the white curls gathering on his boots, spoons being the small change of forest carpentry, made by the dozen, traded, given, lost, and made again. And the old craft of this particular forest, the weaving of birch bark, strips of it, cut in spring and cured, plaited tonight into a new pair of lapti, the woven bark shoes of the whole peasant north, light, breathing, astonishingly comfortable, and famously short-lived. A week of hard walking to a pair, which is why the proverb of this country measures a long journey in lapti worn out, and why a coil of bark strip hangs ready in every izba like thread by every needle. Boots of leather for the frost and the feast, felt valenki for the deep cold, bark lapti for the working day, the forest shooing its people three ways, and the sun plats on in the dark now behind your closed eyes, in memory, the strips whispering over and under, one of the oldest quiet sounds in the world, a basket becoming a shoe, becoming, at this hour, a lullaby, and know, as the wheel hums in memory, that on other nights, this same lamplight hosts the village's sweetest institution, and the daughter-in-law spoke of it at supper with the particular smile it earns. The posidelki, the sitting evenings. Through the black months, the young people of the village gather by turns in one izba or another, the girls with their spinning, because the work travels with them, distaffs over shoulders down the snow street, and the lads arriving after with conspicuous casualness and a sunflower seed nonchalance that fools no grandmother alive, and the evening runs on its ancient double track, the thread lengthening dutifully on the spindles while the songs go around, the long slow ones in close harmony that this country sings better than anywhere on earth, and the game songs with forfeits, and the riddles, and the laughter cresting and being hushed and cresting again, and the chaperoning grandmother in the corner seeing everything, remembering her own sitting evenings, and ruling the room with one eyebrow. Half the marriages of this village were kindled at posidelki, across a spinning wheel, over a mitten deliberately dropped, in the walking home afterward, down the squeaking street under the enormous stars, two lanterns drifting closer together by imperceptible degrees, and the institution knows its own purpose perfectly well and dresses it, with complete propriety, in flax. Work that gathers the young in warm rooms through the long dark courtship that arrives carrying its spinning, the north solving loneliness, and the winter's textile quota in one lamplit stroke, which is exactly the sort of double solution this whole journey has taught you to expect from people who take their winters seriously. And with the crafts in every lap, the evening's true warmth was lit, because this is the country of the skazka, the fireside wonder tale, and the grandmother, who is to stories what she is to stoves, gave the room two of them tonight, in the voice she keeps for it, low, dry, and completely without hurry. The tales of this country have their own furniture, and the household knows every piece and demands them all. The gray wolf who serves the youngest son, the firebird whose one feather lights a room, the hut in the deep forest that stands, notoriously, on hen's legs and turns to face its visitors, home of the fierce old witch of the woods, who is terrible and just in roughly equal measure, and whom the brave and courteous somehow always survive. Courtesy being, in these tales, as in this house, the supreme survival skill, And running through all of them, the tale teller's licensed lies that everyone waits for. The feast where the teller claims to have been a guest. The mead that ran down the mustache but never reached the mouth. The formulas polished by 1,000 tellings, and the children mouthing the famous lines along with her exactly as the Longhouse children mouthed the saga. Because a fireside tale in every language of this journey is not information, it is ceremony, and must be word perfect to work. And one member of tonight's audience was invisible and got his supper anyway. Behind the stove, in the warm dark where the cricket files his note, lives. The household will tell you without embarrassment, the domovoi, the house's own small spirit, the grandfather of the building itself, gruff, useful, easily offended, fond of order and horses, and this family in particular, and the customs of keeping him content are kept. The crust left on the stove ledge, the greeting murmured to the stove corner when the family moved in, the formal invitation spoken, hat in hand. When a household moves house, grandfather, come with us, because leaving him behind is the one unforgivable rudeness. Whether anyone here would swear to him before the icon corner is not the point and never was. The point is what the custom does, which is to make the house a member of the family, fed, greeted, thanked, and moved with. And a family that treats its house as kin keeps its house, generation after generation, in exactly the good order this one gleams with. So the crust on the stove ledge is not superstition precisely. It is the maintenance schedule, written in folklore, and tonight, with the cricket singing and the bricks warm and 9 souls asleep in his keeping, the grandfather of the house, by every measurable standard, is holding up his end. And when the tales were done and the smallest children were being carried up to the stove shelf, the room's last performance was the oldest one, the young mother at the hanging cradle, singing. The lullabies of this country are their own deep genre, and they do not sound like your centuries. They are minor-keyed, slow, half-spoken, wound around the old hushing syllables that every language here builds its cradle songs from, and their words, generation upon generation of them, are little fenced yards of the familiar. Sleep now. The cat has come to rock you. Your father will bring a fish. And, most famous of all, the gentle warning every child of this country has heard 10,000 times, not to sleep too near the cradle's edge, because the little gray wolf will come from the forest. And the remarkable thing, your century's folklorists will note with wonder, is that the wolf verse soothes. It has soothed for centuries. The tiny listener, warm in the swaying cradle with the wolf safely rhymed and miles away, learns the North's first lesson in its mother's lowest voice, that the wild is real, and out there, and named, and that here, inside the song and the log walls and the stove's long warmth, it cannot come. And the naming of the danger is precisely what makes the safety solid enough to fall asleep on. The cradle pole creaked its slow beat. The song wound down to the hushing syllables alone, then to breath, then to the young mother's careful backward step, and the cricket took the melody, such as it is, for the rest of the night, and holds it now, one thin silver note at long intervals, the Izba's smallest singer, keeping the watch of songs. And as the tales wound down, the grandmother, for the visitor's benefit, named the world beyond the village, and her naming was a gift you can carry home, because the great empty spaces of this country entered your own language whole, untranslated, for the sensible reason that nothing in the West was big enough to translate them. The forest you are sleeping inside is the taiga, the endless conifer sea. And when your century's geographers needed a word for that whole belt of dark green running around the crown of the planet, they took this country's because this country had the most of it. South of the forest, the grass begins and runs, treeless and horizonless, to the edge of maps, and that is the steppe, another word your language swallowed whole, the ocean of grass under the ocean of sky, the road of the horse peoples, the word itself as flat and open as the thing, and north of the forest, past the last stunted birches, the land goes bare and frozen floored to the polar sea, and that is the tundra, a word this language itself borrowed from the reindeer peoples of its own far north and passed along west, so that the three great landscapes of the cold half of the earth, forest, grass, and barren, all answer in your century's every atlas to words that came down this country's winter roads. And out of the frozen floor of that farthest word, this country gave your language one creature more. In the tundra's permanently frozen ground, rivers undercutting their banks have, since anyone remembers, uncovered the bodies, actual bodies, tusks, hide and all, of the great woolly elephants of the ice ages, preserved whole in the world's deepest freezer, and the old northern name for the beast, mammoth, traveled west with the astonishing tusks and the more astonishing stories, and became mammoth. And then, because nothing else on earth was named for something so big, became your century's own word for enormity itself. Mammoth undertakings, mammoth appetites, so that every time your century calls anything mammoth, it is speaking Siberian, about a creature the permafrost of this country kept intact. Like everything else, it is given indefinitely, in the dark, at temperature, without comment. One more word rode through the evening's talk, in the master's mention of taxes and the grandmothers of an old coronation year, and it closes a circle. This journey opened 2,000 years ago on a warm Roman night, so catch it before sleep. The emperor of this country is the Tsar, and the word, worn smooth by 1,000 years of this language's mouth, is Caesar. The name of the Roman family you slept a street away from. The name that became the title of every Roman emperor after the first of them, refused, when Rome fell, to die with it. It marched east into the Slavic lands with Byzantium's church and crowns and became Tsar, and it marched north into the German lands and became Kaiser, so that for centuries, at both ends of Europe, emperors bore as their actual title the surname of one Roman politician, and the fact would have amazed no one so much as him. The grandmother, who has lived under 3 Tsars and can name the coronation years the way she names frosts, is using, every time she says the word, a piece of Latin older than the faith in her icon corner, and the circle of this whole journey pulls quietly closed. The fountain-fed street of that first Roman night flowing by the longest of all the caravan routes, the one through time, into the winter vocabulary of a log room in the snow, where an old woman on a warm stove says Caesar in her own way, meaning her own emperor, and is understood from the Baltic to the Pacific. Words you have learned by now are this journey's most durable cargo. Stone falls, empires close, the lamps of every century go out on schedule. But a good word gets up the next morning, crosses a border, learns new clothes, and keeps working. And tonight you are lying in a single room that is quietly employing, all at once, the Latin of the Caesars, the old Slavic for beautiful, the name of the self-boiler, and the forest words big enough to fit the map, all of them earning their keep in the dark, like the stove. Deep in the night, the village's one waking man makes his round, and his sound reaches you on the stovetop as it reaches every warm sleeper along the street, faint, rhythmic, wooden, and reassuring in a dialect you already speak. He is the night watchman, and his instrument is the kolotushka, a wooden rattle, a mallet head swinging on a board, and as he walks the snow-squeaking street in his vast sheepskin, felt boots and mittens the size of loaves. He swings it in a slow, steady knock-knock-knock, not to wake anyone, never to wake anyone, but to be heard being there, the sound announcing to the dark street and the drifted yards that a man is walking, looking, minding, that the chimneys are drawing right, and no ember has escaped to a thatch, and no stranger's sledge stands where it shouldn't, and to announce the same thing with equal usefulness to anything at the forest edge with opinions about hen houses. The fire watch of the paper city carried clappers and a called phrase. The abbey rang bells, the tower swept its beam, the barried road. Here the office wears sheepskin and swings a rattle, and the children of this street have fallen asleep to the Kolatushka's patient wooden heartbeat for as long as the street has stood, and are falling asleep to it now. And so, on your warm masonry, are you? He passes below the window. Knock knock, the squeak of his boots keeping their own time under the rattles, pauses at the corner where the wind sometimes worries the hay barn latch, tries it, finds it fast, and knocks away up the street, the sound thinning into the enormous silence and returning, at its own pace, on his next round, about the time the stove's warmth has carried you too deep to count it, and on the inside of the window glass, an artist has been at work all evening and will work all night, and the children of this house know him by name. The frost is flowering the panes, where the room's faint moisture meets the glass, and the glass meets the enormous cold. Ice is crystallizing in ferns and feathers and palm fronds. Whole silver gardens growing across the panes by morning. Every window in the village its own unrepeatable engraving. And the children here are taught that Grandfather Frost himself walks the street at night painting them, the same white-bearded sovereign of the cold who stars in the winter tales, stern to the rude and open-handed to the good, and whether the frost gardens are his brushwork or the plain geometry of water meeting cold. And the grandmother would tell you serenely that it is both. They will be there at first light, backlit by sunrise, pink and silver and impossibly intricate, and the children will breathe peepholes in them with warm thumbs to see whose chimney is smoking. And by then, the stove will be roaring into its new day, and the gardens will soften and slide and be gone by breakfast. One night's masterpiece. Repainted free. Every night, all winter, on every window of the north. And by the gate, black against the stars, stands the village's tallest silhouette, waiting for morning, and you should greet it before sleep, because you have met it before 3,000 years upstream, on a hotter river. It is the well sweep, the long counterweighted pole balanced on its high post over the well, bucket hanging from the slender end, a great lump of log lashed to the butt end for counterweight, and it is, timber for timber, the shaduf of Egypt, rebuilt in pine at the other end of the earth. For the opposite climate, on the same physics, the counterweight doing the lifting so the human does only the guiding. The bucket sinking easy and rising on its own. And this country's name for the device is its exact silhouette. Juravel, the crane, the bird. Because that is what it looks like against every village sky from here to the steppe. A patient, long-necked bird bowing to the well and straightening, bowing and straightening, all the working day. No one here has ever heard of Egypt's river machines, and no one on that river ever heard of pine. The idea was not carried. It was rediscovered, the way the true ideas always are, because a counterweighted pole is simply what a well, plus a human back plus 5 minutes of genius, equals anywhere on Earth, in any century, and this journey has shown you the same quiet law a dozen ways by now. The arch reinvented, the airlock entry reinvented, the banked fire reinvented, good sense converging on the same shapes wherever the same problems live. Tomorrow at first light, the daughter-in-law will walk out with her yoked pails, and the crane will bow to the well for her, twice, in the pink cold, exactly as its brother bowed to the ditches of the Black Land, while the pyramids were still young, neither of them aware of the other, both of them right. And somewhere in the small hours, the warmth itself half wakes you, the pleasantest of all possible reasons, and without opening your eyes, you find yourself taking the Izba's census in the order the house has taught you. The warmth beneath you first, the great mass still exhaling yesterday's fire, diminished by exactly as much as it should be and no more. The morning's margin safely banked under your shoulder blades. The cricket, filing his note behind the stove, unhurried, employed. The cradle pole's faint creak as the baby stirs and the young mother's arm rises in the dark. One push and settles. The frost cracking a log somewhere in the wall winning. The lampeda's small unwavering point across the room, the beautiful corner keeping its light. The cow's slow breathing through the wall of the sini, and under everything, at the very floor of hearing, the enormous padded silence of snow lying deep on a sleeping village, the loudest quiet in the world. Everything answering, everything banked, and the watchman's rattle far up the street, knock knock, going away. And you go with it. Not up the street, but down into the second sleep, which on a warm stove in deep winter is less like falling and more like being folded. One more warm loaf back into the oven's gentlest shelf. And as the stove's warmth carries you toward the deep hours, let the village year wheel once around the room, because the north keeps its calendar in festivals and frosts, and this house can recite it asleep. Deep winter first, this very trench of the year, the season of the stove and the loom and the tales, and its crown, the 12 nights after Christmas, the sviatki, when the village goes visiting in masks and songs, mummers tramping the snow street from izba to izba, and the girls tell fortunes by candle and mirror and molten wax in water. The year's licensed fortnight of mischief and mystery, conducted at 20 below and remembered until June. Then the year's loudest goodbye, Maslenitsa, Butter Week, the last week before the Great Fast, when the whole country eats pancakes, blini, round and golden as the sun they are frankly impersonating, with butter, with sour cream, with everything the fast is about to forbid. A week of sledging parties and visiting and pancake diplomacy between mothers-in-law, ending with the burning of winter's straw effigy on the common, because the North does not let its winter merely end. It throws it a funeral with catering. Then, the mud. The Rasputitsa, the roadless season, the great thaw when the winter roads rot and the cart roads drown, and the whole vast country simply stops moving for some weeks, twice a year, spring and fall. The season, your century's historians will note, has disarranged the timetables of every army ever sent here, and the village waits it out as it has always waited, mending harness, starting seedlings on the stove ledge, watching the river ice groan and shoulder, and finally go, the breakup running past the village for days, like a slow white freight of the whole winter, leaving. Then the enormous brief summer, the white nights when the sky barely darkens, the haymaking that is the year's great shared labor, whole villages in the meadows to the horizon, the mushrooms beginning, the banya busy, the windows open at midnight to birdsong, the harvest, the sauerkraut bee, the cellar filling, the first frost that sweetens the late cabbage, the zavalinka banked fresh, the double windows fitted, the winter roads hardening back into highways, and the sledges running again, and the stove resuming its full sovereignty, and the year folding back down, contented, onto the warm shelf where it started, which is where you are and where it is keeping you. And now, with the brick's long warmth rising through the sheepskins, walk the izba once more, corner to corner, touching each thing as you pass it and letting it go. The stove beneath you, the whitewashed sun, yesterday's flame arriving all night through the masonry like a letter posted early. Let it go. The one fire a day, the heat locked in and paid out even and slow. The battery of warmth that asks for nothing after breakfast? Let it go. The logs locked at the corners with their moss seams, the whole house cut and raised by the axe alone, and the wooden churches standing yet, without one iron nail, held up by the way their timbers embrace. Let them go. The beautiful corner and its steady lampada, Krasny that meant lovely before it meant red, and the famous square that is, in its bones, the beautiful one. Let it go. The 3 generations stacked in their winter order, the hanging cradle that rocks itself on its springy pole, and one push from a sleeping mother's arm. Let them go. The ledger read aloud without flinching, the warmth real and the bondage real, and the family that built a warm and orderly world inside a condition it could not refuse, which may be the greater achievement of this whole journey. Let it go. The vault of the stove cooking the day at one firing, the shchi gone deep and round, the kasha you cannot spoil with butter, the black rye cut against the chest, and the kvass that is the loaf's own afterlife. Let them go. The bread and the salt on the embroidered towel, the year's work and the trader's wealth offered in one gesture, and the loaf on its shelf with the corner a guest broke, which is the finest thing bread can do. Let it go. The samovar singing itself to the boil, the tea that crossed the whole of Asia, and the lump of sugar lasting an evening of glasses between patient teeth. Let it go. The bee trees marked with the family sign, the hollow tree art, and the winter hive clustered and shivering in shifts, the village within the village, living till April on sweetness put by in June. Let them go. The cellar half wilderness, the mushrooms on their threads, the barrels of sour victory, and February tasting last summer's garden by the stove. Let them go. The squeaking snow, the smoke standing straight, the frost cracking the logs and the wall winning, every time, all night. Let it go. The winter road running straight down the frozen river, the troika's bell song swelling and fading up the white miles, and the valenki drying on the stove ledge, warming for tomorrow. Let them go. The banya's birch-scented steam, the Venek's leafy argument, the plunge into the drift and the walk back across the yard, pink, boneless, and beatific. Let it go. The wheel spinning the lamplight into thread, the spoons curling off the birch, and the lapti plaited over and under, a basket becoming a shoe, becoming a lullaby. Let them go. The sitting evenings with their double track of thread and courtship, the distaffs down the snow street, and 2 lanterns drifting closer by imperceptible degrees. Let them go. The frost gardens flowering on every pane, one night's masterpiece, repainted free until morning, and the warm thumbs that will breathe peepholes in them at first light. Let them go. The lullaby with the little gray wolf, safely rhymed in miles away, the danger named so the safety would hold, and the cricket taking the melody for the rest of the night. Let it go. The hut on hen's legs turning to face the brave and the courteous, the crust left on the stove ledge for the grandfather of the house, and the maintenance schedule written in folklore. Let them go. The taiga, the steppe, and the tundra, the 3 cold kingdoms that entered your atlas untranslated, and the mammoth handed up whole out of the world's deepest freezer. Let them go. The czar who is Caesar gone east in winter clothes, the Roman street flowing down the longest caravan route of all, the one through time, into this log room. Let it go. The Kolatushka's patient wooden heartbeat, going up the snow street and coming back, the man in the vast sheepskin, being heard being there, let him go. And the crane by the gate, the shadoof reborn in pine at the cold end of the earth, bowing to the well for 3,000 years on 2 rivers that never heard of each other, both of them right. Let it go. It is all still there and all still warm. That is this house's entire promise, and it is made of brick and arithmetic. The stove was fired this morning with the night already in mind. The margin is banked under your shoulders. The lampada is trimmed. The bolt is home. The cricket is on duty. And the cold, which owns everything outside to the horizon and beyond, owns not 1 brick of the warm mountain you are lying on, and will not by morning, and knows it. so your hands can let go of the day, your shoulders can let go of the day, and your thoughts can haul themselves up onto the stove now too, one by the little worn footholds in the masonry, and settle among the sleepers on the warm shelf, under the sheepskins, in the good dark, where the whole North has always put the things it wants kept till morning. One last thing, and the stove itself should say it in its own material language. Every night watch of this journey has been kept by someone: the sacrist, the keeper, the navigator, the man with the rattle passing under the window now. But tonight, for the first time in all these centuries, the watch is also being kept by the bed you are lying on. The stove is the night shift. It was given its orders this morning, a whole fire's worth of them, and it has been carrying them out ever since without flame or fuss or feeding, and it will still be carrying them out when the window squares turn from blue to gray. Warmth delivered hour by hour through the dark with the reliability of masonry, which is the highest reliability this journey knows, and it asks of its sleepers exactly what the whole North asks, which is nothing. The lampada is burning in the beautiful corner. The cricket is filing his silver note behind the bricks. The rattle is making its far rounds, knock knock, fainter, gone, and coming back. And beneath you, all night, yesterday's fire is arriving, on schedule, brick by brick, like the gentlest freight in the world, consigned this morning to you by an old woman who has never once in 40 winters let it run short. Sleep now on top of the warmth itself. Good night.